Folks, look, there's a writer named Thomas Pynchon. He wrote, if they can get you asking the wrong questions, they don't have to worry about the answers. Let me say it again. If they can get you asking the wrong questions, they don't have to worry about the answers.
Yes, folks. Left Reckoning 176. And the question we're all asking after Thursday night's debate is, does Trump have the morals of an alley cat? And then we said, wait a second, that's a weird thing to be thinking about right now. Maybe we should focus on the senility just exhibited by the leader of the free world. And anyway, David Griscom, welcome to Left Reckoning 176. It feels a little bit patriotic. 176. I know it's not 1776, but we're right ahead of
you're right.
July. It feels like a patriotic number.
I mean, it's all coded. It feels like something on its way, for sure.
And also joining us to help us decode a lot of these mysteries, like Trump's alley cat morals and our president's, failing administration, Emma Vigeland, host of the Majority Report. Hey, Emma.
Hey. So we're into numerology now. Is that what we're doing over here?
A little bit.
We're just dabbling in all sorts.
It's been a little while since you've been on the show. Basically, Matt and I are just, we're getting to the bottom of things these days.
Okay, so like the bottom of a spirituality rabbit hole. That's where you get to numerology, I feel like.
Yeah, I mean, it hasn't been that long when you count it in terms of active genocides, because she was on shortly after October 7th, and that still continues. And now we have to look at Joe Biden. Did he actually see those beheaded kids in one of his sort of dementia dreams? Or was he just cynically spewing a propaganda lie? It's, an open question now. Man, I don't know where to start, because this is a very let's start at the beginning.
Yes.
Last Tuesday, there was a debate.
Thursday. Close.
Yeah.
Today's Tuesday, the tease. It was last Thursday. Trump and Biden debated, and it did not go well for Biden. And I will say, we're going to, Emma's going to take her victory lap in a little bit, which may be a little bit premature. I don't know. We'll see. But I was not confident in Joe Biden's acuity going into it. I even said so on the Majority Report TikTok live. But here is basically that coming to fruition.
He had the largest national debt of any president in a 4-year period, number one. Number two, he got $2 trillion tax cut, benefited the very wealthy. What I'm going to do is fix the tax system. For example, we have 1,000 billionaires in America. And what's happening? They're in a situation where they, in fact, pay 8.2% in taxes. If they just paid 24%, 25%, either one of those numbers, they'd raise $500 billion, I should say, in a 10-year period. We'd be able to write one.
Now, this isn't actually what's notable about this clip, but do you guys have any reactions so far, like just about what this says about the status quo of Democrat politics?
It's the most muddled messaging possible. I think, they are blaming his over preparation and that's over preparedness, I guess, by the staff, which is silly, but it does seem like he came with a lot of stats in his head and didn't necessarily come with a clear message.
And I have to say that's just such an odd choice for Joe Biden, because, Joe Biden's been in politics for a long time. He's run for president many times. And, no one has ever sort of said, Joe Biden, that's a real policy wonk, right? That's never been his thing.
Yeah. He's
always just been sort of able to embody I don't know, the vibe of somebody who feels presidential or elder statesman or whatever, at least in the modern era. You're not going to be able to win with this kind of thing where it's Joe Biden he's the facts man.
Yeah. And I'd also just say, even if he wasn't, sundowning, this whole thing where we invoke billionaires and then say, let's move their taxes up from X percentage to Y percentage. How about no? How about billionaires we're done negotiating with billionaires and trying to technocrat our way out of that. A lot of this is not his fault. like there's a lot that is his fault that disqualifies from not only being the candidate, in my opinion, but continuing in office.
Yeah.
But there's also, he's running a software that sucks as well. Like his hardware is fucked. The software is also not good here. So we'll let this play out.
$1 billion, I should say, in a 10-year period. We'd be able to wipe out his debt. We'd be able to help make sure that all those things we need to do, child care, elder care, making sure that we continue to strengthen our healthcare system, making sure that we're able to make every single solitary person eligible for what I've been able to do with the with the COVID. With dealing with everything we have to do with. Look, if we finally beat Medicare.
Thank you, President Biden. President Trump?
Well, he's right. He did beat Medicare. He beat it to death, and he's destroying.
I mean, if there was ever a hanging curveball served up over the plate, just a disaster.
I mean, and that was what, 5-10 minutes into the debate. I mean, there's a good chance a majority of people that were watching that debate tuned out after 10-20 minutes. And that is like the Biden cope line is that he got stronger as the debate went on, which I don't even necessarily think is true. But yeah, it was a historically bad performance that will be written about in history books. A seismic shift in the discourse and in the facts on the ground, to use an Iraq war era phrase or whatever.
No, that's an Israeli occupation phrase.
Oh, sorry. I guess maybe they borrow, the neocons in this country borrowed it. But either way, I mean, still kind of apt to use for Joe Biden.
No, but I think you're right about so what's crazy now is like people talk about like Nixon and his flop sweat in the 1960 debate. And also JFK boxed him in saying like, I'm going to be more of a hawk on Cuba when Nixon was planning to invade Cuba. But that had a big effect because it was new. The medium was new. Mm-hmm. Presidential debates were a new thing. So we hadn't been inoculated. We've been so inoculated that like these things we had to prove that it meant something. And right, this was the ultimate test. It was such a disaster that the status quo sort of like, which is, I believe, frankly, and you can look at me in all the debates we've covered on Majority Report where I'm scrolling my phone being like, I hate my life right now that we're watching some of this stuff. Because it's like, it is meaningless often. Mm-hmm. That wasn't meaningless because it's a reality that had been put aside as a narrative earlier in the year because the guy made one good showing. And David, you were going to say something.
Oh, I mean, I was just going to ask y'all. I mean, I know Matt's opinion, before the debate, it's like both of us were saying, no, who's particularly interested in this? I mean, at this point, most of these debates have gone quite boring to me, but, it was a kind of like the only question was like, is Biden going to show up, on like some level of competence? And I just like, I thought it was going to be bad, but I have to admit, I was shocked that it was as bad as it was.
Absolutely. I mean, obviously, I was shocked too. I probably had a rosier outlook where I thought, okay, I had the Biden administration or campaign's thinking was, hey, we're going to set this debate earlier than has ever been set for two general election candidates, late June. It's usually much later, closer to the fall, because they wanted to be able to remind the public of the contrast between Trump and Biden. That was the theory going in. And I thought, okay, they set these terms, they set the format, they did the mute button, no audience, like all of if there's never been a greater home field advantage, and Trump agreed to it, and here we go. And it was an absolute train wreck. And a lot of the, I guess, sealing of him off from the public makes more sense in retrospect when you look at the past 6 months when apparently like this reporting is all coming out so rapidly. But it seems like that's when things have really taken a turn for the worse for him in terms of his cognition, even though we of course saw many signs at this point. But yeah, I think also that debate between Nixon and Kennedy, it's mostly instructive because of its novelty, as you say, but also because like when you learn about it, it's about the people on the radio who listened to it had a different opinion than the people who were watching it on TV because of the visual nature of it. And that's the lesson, I guess, you glean from that versus this, which was, oh my God, the opposition party to a fascist party, or a party that is going down a road that could lead towards fascism with Donald Trump in office, who has been insisting that this election is literally about the existential threat to democratic processes in this country, allowed a man, an incumbent president, to run the show with a small cadre of advisors that included his wife, his sister, who's in her late 70s, and his 85-year-old advisor, Ted Kaufman, among a few others, to decide to run for re-election without any real institutional pushback from the Democratic Party and without them really having a full understanding about the state of his cognition. And they were taken by surprise, seemingly, as well. So what does that say about the modern Democratic Party and their actually commitment to what they say in terms of the branding of this? Because the reality is that Biden has been down in the polls nationally and in every swing state up to this point. And this was the opportunity to change that course. And we went in the exact opposite direction. Polling coming out internally from the Democrats showing he's gone down and Democrats' chances in every swing state. And then CNN
2 points everywhere, at least.
2 points everywhere, and a 6-point national gap now versus like a 3 or 4 one via CNN between him and Donald Trump. And then this is like, okay, we're fucked. We are fucked. And it's because this party has given itself over to a gerontocracy, to an octogenarian class, whether it be Ruth Bader Ginsburg, whether it be Dianne Feinstein, and they've decided to be to allow these people who are, supposedly stewards of democracy to take control of this party for their own personal ego reasons. And I think Biden is a real, like, the most stark and scary and high stakes example of that.
That's what's fascinating about this now. Sorry, I was muted. Is how much this is turning into. Emma, you made the joke today because Biden showed up to his next speech all tan, that he's like just mimicking whatever Trump does. And he's literally turning into Trump. And there's this stuff going on with his son now too, which like this makes me think like, oh, the knives are out for Biden.
Yes.
If this stuff's getting reported, because okay. So anyway, Ken Delaney at NBC. Hunter Biden has joined meetings with President Biden and his top aides this week at the White House. 4 people familiar with the matter tell my colleagues, who are told the reaction from some senior White House staff has been, what the hell is happening? And Delaney also tags that with, in 2019, Hunter allegedly texted his father, if you don't run, I'll never have a chance at redemption. And then there's also this Riley Rogerson frustration with Team Biden is calcifying in Dem circles. One Democratic lawmaker didn't mince words. The Praetorian Guard around Biden is losing the election, and all they can do is shame other Dems for having an honest reaction to what they're seeing and hearing. And what's funny about this is I saw a great tweet by somebody who's like, my entire life I voted for this party, and all they do is treat me like I'm some underperforming employee, like just for noticing basic reality. And I'll just continue with this. Meanwhile, the fate of our republic rests in the hands of a dozen longtime Biden sycophants and family members. I mean, how Trump-like is this? Including Hunter Biden, who are the only ones Joe seriously consults. A good rule of thumb, this Democratic member continued, whatever Hunter, well, yeah, I mean, we know Hunter Biden's not really a good rule of, I mean, it's wild. And what did we hear the entire time Hunter was going through his legal troubles is, you're not electing Hunter Biden. Well, I guess we're like giving him a chance at redemption now instead of, I mean, yeah, anyway.
Go ahead, Grissom.
Oh, I mean, just adding to this, and I want to hear your thoughts. I mean, like, I know the thoughts here is that, like, there's a lot of frustration, but what this has really exposed is how dysfunctional the Democratic Party is, but also how in line so many other folks were with this. Because basically, tell me if you agree with this narrative, Emma. Like, there's the inside of the Biden White House, which was certainly trying to keep these things quiet. But still, we've been getting all these kind of leaks from people saying, well, actually, I've seen this and I've noticed this and I've noticed that there is like that kind of outside shell that also is making sure that this kept silent. And now that exterior wing is trying to pressure the Biden administration, to have him step down, right? And to me, apart from being an absolute dereliction of duty to the country, to the society, and certainly to those folks in the Democratic Party, it shows that this is a party that's completely unserious. Like, I spent a lot of time looking at the Texas Republican Party, just the Republican Party at large, right? Because Trump is an interesting phenomenon because he sort of runs that party, but also there's all these other kind of shadow interests there that are running it. And I've always sort of said, it's like, the interesting thing about the Republican Party is they seem exceptionally dysfunctional. And you see that with a lot of the infighting that's been going on with the Republican Party. Well, what this exposed is that the Democratic Party, it's worse than the Republican Party. And it's kind of hard to imagine in the sense of like their dysfunction.
Right, right. I mean, look, I totally agree with all of that. And I will say that I think part of why my hair was on fire this weekend in a way that perhaps like Matt or maybe Sam or I didn't understand fully, or why I was texting you guys a million times all these articles and things like that, was because I'd never seen a reaction like this to the debate. Is really what I was getting at that point, because this was a moment where it exposed that the entirety of this campaign has been basically a house of cards, just praying that this kind of moment that didn't happen. And they had even in the best of circumstances, Biden was unable to perform. So it also, I think, colors the way that he's dealt with Benjamin Netanyahu in the genocide in Gaza in a little bit of a different way. And looking back,
because he still thinks he's talking to a Golda Meir, basically.
Right. And like, when you get older too, you kind of like fall into, I think, the most pure form of your racism that you probably had your entire life. It just becomes a little bit more at the forefront of your brain. I think maybe I've seen that with some grandparents, right? Saying some things that were inappropriate that maybe they wouldn't have said a few years ago. Like, Biden's dehumanization of Palestinians is so default at this point because his brain is just at that level. And it also makes it so Netanyahu can walk all over him. But like, the terms were all set on, he set all of the terms, his team set all the terms. And just from the perspective of the Democratic Party too, like the entire public is devastated by the fact that these are the two candidates that we have running for president right now. This is actually a significant opportunity for the Democrats to change the narrative in a way that was going like quite poorly for them. And even if it's someone like Kamala Harris, I mean, that's not my ideal candidate. I'm joking. I'm in the K-Hive now. But it does give some relief in a race where people have been basically dejected to say, hey, we're going to listen to this discontent and we will adjust accordingly. I think that could turn the tide for Democrats in some way, but it's uncharted waters, and the level of like Democratic Party insiders and discontent is unprecedented. And what raised my alarm, I guess, over the weekend was that New York Times editorial board leading the way and saying Biden has to step aside. And then after that, it was the Wall Street Journal, the Chicago Tribune, the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, and then the editor of the New Yorker. And it just seemed to me that these people all run in kind of similar circles, particularly like at the New York Times editorial board. They know Democrats in power. They're not going to do that without some sort of conversation that's had about the severity of the situation. And I think it portended a lot of the knives that have come out for Biden that we're seeing over the past 48 hours. And it's moving at this like extremely rapid pace.
Well, I want to talk about the other big news that doesn't portend well for somebody like Biden being completely ineffective as a president right now. But I wanted to, we could talk about maybe who we think they might pick or whatever. And if you have a hot take, I'd love to hear it. But I think more importantly, I don't know. I think that it is absolutely impossible for Biden to win, and I think that keeping him as the candidate's malpractice.
Yep.
I think that, and I'm curious what y'all think. Is like, I think that this exposed something so much deeper within the Democratic Party that's going to be hard even for like a kind of perfect lab candidate to come in and be able to ride this. Like, look, there's an advantage. Trump is very unpopular, all that kind of stuff. But I mean, this really shows a dysfunctional party. And if the Democrats' message continues to be, we're the serious guys in the room, and the crazy people are the Republicans, I mean, this completely deflates that message.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that they've broken whatever was remaining of the public trust in that way, in addition to tamping enthusiasm. The trust is gone. Can you reinvigorate some level of enthusiasm? Matt made a great point on the show today about how abortion being central to the race could be an easy fit for the first female president if Kamala Harris were to step in, which, a lot of experts on campaign finance law are saying it's basically impossible for a lot of the money legally would not be able to be transferred over to anybody who wasn't Kamala Harris. So I think she should be the favorite right now. And also the optics of passing her over would be bad. But I think that you can create that narrative at the very least from like an electoral perspective. Abortion's going to be on the ballot in Nevada and in Arizona. So you can say, okay, like this is about protecting women's rights and suburban women. You're the linchpin apparently to this race. Come over to us. But in terms of the institutional rot of the Democratic Party, I mean, yeah, like we are in clearly late stage empire stuff. And it's a global phenomenon in this way where centrist to center right parties who have excommunicated or like completely cracked down on leftist elements in their party have been paving way for fascist takeover in other parts of the West. What we're seeing right now with Macron in France is also indicative of that. It's a failure of free market liberalism in the absence of any kind of like even slightly like Keynesian economic model. Like there's no they've attempted and successfully really to hollow out the like any kind of left of center thought or power structure within the Democratic Party. And I think that like this complete emptiness is made obvious by Biden.
Yeah, I mean, we talked with Milton Alamadi about what's going on in South Africa. I mean, France, the elections. This is really the victory of neoliberalism and a certain kind of liberalism that like sort of prioritizes the individual rights of politicians to sort of hold an office. Like Ruth Bader Ginsburg, it's her right to go out when she wants to. That's an insane way to think about politics. That's infantile, and it's significantly ruining the world. And I keep thinking about Democrats have had the executive position in the United States government for over half of my life. And look, they might have won the popular vote that would give them that for even more than that, but they have had this power, and it has been squandered. It has been wasted and abused. The abuse of, because Donald Trump is a historically bad candidate. He was in 2016 too. And to fail in this kind of way, and now we're turning around being like, hey, Bernie bros, this is what 2016 gets you. I mean, I think I think everyone should probably widen their scope. I think this trajectory goes back to like, I don't know if Goldwater's too far, but like the 80s. And, we talk about presidents now, the Supreme Court decision, presidents not facing, sort of liability for anything they do. Like, did Reagan for Iran-Contra? Like, right. Like in a way, this is just like what we're seeing now is a bonfire of myths that sustained the preceding generations, Gen X and boomers, and all that stuff is out the window now. And it is just basically like, we're getting back to just power. And the Democrats aren't playing that game.
I think you're hitting on something with like this almost fetishization or celebrityification of our politicians. It's like a deep cynicism towards the collective, right? Because these folks really internalize, and like the Democratic Party incentivizes them to feel like, mascots or celebrities or the one person that can do this. And we don't really have mechanisms within the Democratic Party to discipline that. The Ruth Bader Ginsburg example is key. Aaron Rupar took a lot of issue with me blaming liberals for the situation that we're in with the Supreme Court. But the reality is that it's a failure of liberal maintenance of these institutions that we were in this position. Ruth Bader Ginsburg died with a few months left in Trump's term, and she could have retired under Hillary, but she chose not to under Obama, because she wanted Hillary Clinton to appoint her replacement, because it would be this like poetic moment for her and her future documentary that the first female president would appoint her replacement. And whether it be that or Dianne Feinstein or Biden in this instance, that the Democratic Party is for some reason serving the interests of this gerontocratic class, this elite class, versus the inverse. And I think like the rubber has met the road here.
And I think it is because of this global like anti-left. Their preoccupation is with icing out Bernie. I mean, basically, right? Like, and like that is the only thing that they've been able to like actively do. And I mean, I guess,
and it's because they control those levers. It's like, because within the party they can, do whatever kind of games that they want. They struggle to do that in an American society. They don't have the ability to do that. And I'll tell you, I mean, it's an example of a party that's 100% captured by elite interest, but a particular kind of like credential class interest. You see that in all those examples you were just giving, Emma, or the fact that Vogue came out with this, incredible, cover story about the First Lady Joe Biden. Well, excuse me, doctor.
Yes. Doctor, don't you besmirch her credentials.
And it is something that it's truly incredible to see how far this party has gotten from its most popular period, which was like under the FDR years, but also how comfortable it is. And I think that this is another thing that's really important for people to sort of get here, is that the Democratic Party is not even really in the business of winning elections, or like that's not the number one goal. The number one goal is controlling and maintaining power over one of the arms of the American political system, which is the Republican or the Democratic Party. And because of the way the system's set up, those parties have a huge advantage. Maintaining control of that institution is the most important things for the people that are involved in that, regardless of if it loses or wins or loses elections for them. And it's something that's exceptionally dangerous for everyday folks in this country.
Yeah.
I mean, I just want to point out this Jared Golden quote that came out before the show here. U.S. Democratic Rep Jared Golden of Maine writes an op-ed minutes ago, Donald Trump is going to win and I'm okay with that, and basically says that it's democracy is going to be fine. And I think there is something to say about, like, we're talking about Rachel Maddow. Maybe we'll get to that. We guys need to win every election ever. Otherwise, it's going to be fascism. It's like, well, then fascism is here, because that's not going to happen. So let's start actually think about how we fight that. But I would just note that Jared Golden, a democracy means him and Joe Manchin killing Build Back Better for the bipartisan infrastructure bill. So that's right. Like, they don't care. And that's why people who think like, and I don't want to talk about voting, but I will just say people who think like you can send these people a message by not voting for them, they will be just fine.
True enough. But I would say that there's the other aspect here too, where just like, I think leftists and progressive people who want to build alternatives, they have to be comfortable with the fact that Democrats are going to lose elections. And that means, like, if we want to build up independent organizations or independent movements, that might mean Democratic candidates losing certain kinds of elections. I'm not saying to just do that willy-nilly or symbolically or whatever, but no, I mean, they're not worried about it. They're comfortable with it. And frankly, they're extremely comfortable with genocide in Gaza. And you're seeing this with Joe Biden, very comfortable with making permanent some of the most horrific shit at the border, and fundamentally letting the systems and institutions of American democracy rot at their core. Because eventually, if you start telling people that, hey, you don't need to vote for a candidate or participate in politics in some kind of positive, way to build something better for your future, but solely defensively, well, eventually those systems are just going to begin to rot. And you're seeing this with the cynicism that you see in folks. You're seeing this in some of the reactionary stuff. I mean, watching people who have gone from, supporting maybe an Obama in 2008 to either maybe not participating in politics at all, or hell, being like crazed Donald Trump people, that comes from something when people feel very angry and frustrated, that like they feel like their democracy isn't theirs, because they're constantly sort of told that if you sort of put forward your view here, that's sort of not allowed, right? That's not responsible.
Right. I mean, and I think it also it works in the way that the cynicism here, at the very least, works in the favor of the Republicans, or in terms of like a backslide into conservatism, because like the Democrats as a maintenance party can never have the urgency that the Republicans as the party of pure capital interests or pure racism possess, because they are always in like this fight or flight anxiety mode for the most part, where it's either people at the border, or it's they're coming for your guns, or it's the groomers, that they operate in that mode of thinking, versus the Democratic Party attempting to shame or trying to appeal to the public in terms of like, let's maintain this institution even though we're not going to be proactive about it. I mean, I saw that Biden's team is apparently trying to run with like, hey, we can talk about how even if Biden is not popular with voters, we have to elect his team, like these faceless people that you don't know about who are really competent and great. And that's the strategy that's the only way that they can move forward in that in this instance, if they're actually going to keep Biden at the top of the ticket. But I guess I do have some hope that if they are like sufficiently disciplined and actually they do withdraw Biden here, that it could create some energy. Where that energy goes, I'm not exactly sure at this point.
Yeah, I mean,
I will say, like, I mean, when we talk about like Kamala Harris, I think I would make no promises, frankly. I think there's an opportunity, for instance, for her to take a different tact on, say, Israel policy. If Biden resigned, for instance, or if Biden said, I'm not going to seek a second term, I'm going to serve this one out and let it be Kamala. I don't think that she will. I frankly don't think she will. I think Biden is like very bad and historically bad. And I think like a lot of the like individual reasons about him color it. I don't think Kamala Harris is ready for that. I don't think she's like, I mean, I'm just curious. And I said another illustrious guest of this program, Danny Bessner, asked of American Prestige, like what a Kamala Harris foreign policy looks like. Apparently she's married to somebody who's been saying, criticizing Israel's Semitic.
Although her stepdaughter, his kid was fundraising for Gaza, so that's the other.
Who are we talking about? Who's her husband?
Kamala Harris, Doug.
Amoff.
Yeah, his.
She'll remember the hipster daughter, Kamala's hipster daughter that everyone's really mad about.
Yeah, because she thinks Palestinians are human beings.
But that's good, Yeah.
Well, I mean, this might seem frivolous to talk about, but as Joe Biden's teaching us, these sorts of familial politics are maybe decisive. But I don't know, like, yeah, I don't know if that kind of took us into the.
I have no faith in this. I'm the urgency that I feel like about this situation is to stave off a second Trump administration, which I don't want to downplay, and I don't think anyone here is, but just to reiterate it, like I find the Project 2025 pre-clearance of these like basically fascist bureaucrats to put in power to be deeply concerning. His promises to slash the federal government and like the employees there and the services many times over to be deeply troubling. And that paired with this latest Supreme Court decision, which basically says that any act that is that a president takes that we deem official is legal, and the president is immune from prosecution while they're in power. This really sets up a situation where it could be extremely troubling for marginalized people around this country, if we don't have a change of course, and like dire situation. So, I have no faith in the Democratic Party to correct itself in this way. But I do think there's an opportunity to present themselves as the party that's at least listening to the public, even if it's a cynical, and they were forced to, a public that's deeply disenchanted with the political process and the two candidates that they have in front of them. But in terms of like the toothpaste going back in the tube for Biden resigns or he loses. and he loses in a historic, epic fashion where the Republicans take back a lot of seats in both the House and the Senate. Those are the two options that are on the table at this point.
The thing that I think is going to be really interesting, and I've been trying to see if there's, I mean, it's probably too early to really see much, but how this has affected some of those big Senate races or down ballot races for the Democratic Party. Because there's a part of me that feels like, maybe it won't have too much of an effect because like they've sort of, I mean, a lot of these Democrat Senate candidates were beating Biden, in their home states.
Right.
But it's hard to tell right now to see like how much this paints
Yeah.
the Democratic Party in general with voters. Which I bring up just to say, like, there's a very bizarre kind of situation where like the Democrats do fairly well in the House and the Senate, and we get a bombastic Trump presidency that's been hyper empowered by the most anti-democratic organization in the United States of America, and frankly, just to be honest, like the most like anti-democrat and anti-liberal organization in America, which is the Supreme Court of the United States. Amongst liberals, you will find some of the most impassioned defenders of the Supreme
absolutely.
Court, and I can't believe it.
It's incredible. The Democrats and their almost religious faith in our institutions have led us down like a historically disastrous path in that way. This notion that institutions are in and of themselves worthy of protection because they are institutions, the circular logic that Democrats engage in, and it's self-serving. But it's also fanciful, and it shows how far the party has to go to actually incorporate any kind of real meaningful perspective from marginalized people in this country, or abroad at all. Because if you were to ask people who are outside of like the Democratic Party power structure what these institutions have done for them, you would get a wildly different answer than what you're going to hear from Biden or Kamala Harris or anybody who's in power, or Pelosi. And that's because they don't really take seriously the concerns and the experiences of marginalized people in this country. And that is, I think, also contributing to the cynicism, because their voices are not being heard, just faces being used.
It's struggle in this country that we just, and the Gaza stuff is entirely indicative of like these universities that sell to prospective students a lineage of activism, and then cracking down on it. This is like, the truth is like what happened, like how the narrative about say COINTELPRO was exposed was a burglary of an FBI office. How often do we hear about stuff like that, right? Like that actually it takes things like that, or it takes like, let's say right now we have this anti-homeless bill that's going on where somebody literally mentions protesters' encampments as something that is also targeted by that. Do we know that like part of the March on Washington was planning to encamp on there and stay there until they gave in to demands? Like we have packaged up all of the type of like severe resistance and activism that got us anywhere in this country as a commercial product, and it's now inert. And so you have the Democrats, they can kneel in kente cloths during a protest when it's needed for a campaign, but like actually doing it, and it's like, yeah, we are. I think fascism is a real word to worry about in this country. I think maybe we could just start using Zionism, maybe as a better proxy for the people who subscribe to like a extreme crackdown of American freedom and a colonial projects like that. But like, I don't know, like I'm rambling a little bit, so I'll let one of you guys jump in.
No, I mean, I think, what you're saying is like an important like challenge, and this is the kind of moment that we're at, which like it's tough because we can talk like big about democracy and all this kind of stuff. Oh, we need a new party, we need this and that. But I think that, we really need to recognize that one thing is very clear, that the Democratic Party is ill-equipped and, in fact, oftentimes participating in the same kind of politics as the Republican Party when it comes to the magic fascism. You see the attacks on the ability to protest in this country coming in both red and blue states, right? You see the sliding away from, of these kind of rights, the willingness to sort of let these things happen, to play politics in a way that advantages the Republicans and the right when it comes to the Supreme Court, and really seriously think about how can we build something or create something that can win. Because I think, all of us to different degrees, are critical of the leadership of the Democratic Party, and also believe that, there's an importance in sort of building these kind of alternatives, through some of these like more radical, let's even call them the squad members of Congress. But as we saw with Bowman, and Matt Karp had a really great essay on this in Jacobin, it's 100% true that what happened to Bowman was AIPAC putting their finger on the scale. And it's 100% true too that like Bowman didn't lose that election because he's like on the left or something like that. It's because he got moved into a district super rich, right? Super rich, and a district that was very pro-Zionist. But there's a second question. Why is it that that kind of progressive to DSA politics is competing so hard in those places, that those are where these fights are happening, and not in all of these other zip codes and places across the country that desperately need that kind of politics? And I think that instead of doing one of these things that is bound to happen over the next 4 months, where like the left divides itself over whether or not they want to do kind of symbolic votes or strategic votes for president, is to really sit down and think what it is about the movement, what it is about the politics, what it is about the messaging, and the organizations that have sort of left so much of progressive politics to be something that's happening in more elite zip codes and parts of the country, and how can we expand that kind of politics in the places that really need it and should be the people who are the standard bearers for these kind of movements.
Yeah, right. And I think there's like this almost cynical disaster capitalism quality to many districts around the country, where if it's vulnerable to or there's been some capital flight, there's essentially like we have a legalized corruption and bribery system in this country where you can just flood money into a particular area and buy politicians in that way. I mean, there's a reason that the squad is coming up through areas that are deeply blue, urban, and a mix of all different kinds of people, or often sometimes minority, majority in some of the districts, until, of course, Bowman was very strategically by the New York Democratic Party pushed into one of the wealthiest suburbs of the city, and that's how his district expanded. But yeah, I mean, the institutional problems of the Democratic Party still persist. And I think what's so especially disheartening about this moment is that in the wake of 2016, there were a lot of reckonings that happened. There were stupid liberals that read Hillbilly Elegy and took the wrong lessons. But there were a lot of people that took the right lessons, which is that this is the liberal maintenance party is no longer sufficient. And it's time for a different kind of politics. And Justice Democrats was a part of that, with AOC, with Ayanna Pressley, with Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar. They were the first four. And then the next years, it was Cori Bush and Jamal Bowman. And those were opportunities, for hope in that instance. But none of this stuff is linear. And you saw the Trump administration sufficiently scare people enough, rightfully so, into a brand, and the pandemic as well, into a brand of politics that felt very safe and comfortable, and that's what Biden represented. And that, like, temporary return, it's like, America got back with their toxic ex and realized it was a really bad idea, and now it's all coming in, falling apart. There was just a bad paint job on the Democratic Party during that time, where it appeared like gains were being made, and the backlash is significant. And it was a house of cards, and it's come crumbling down because of the ego of an older man whose lifelong dream has been to be president.
Well, and I mean, it has to be extended. Biden is going to put the cherry on top of this, but Obama, the squandering of that movement,
Yeah.
that was, I think, in part led into it. It's not just Occupy Wall Street that led into the Bernie movement. I think a lot of Bernie bros were also Obama bros. So, I mean, maybe I'm just speaking for myself. Um, uh, there was a story late in his administration, I think by Vice, about basically like, oh, this Organizing for America thing where we have all these, activists willing to knock doors and win Iowa. Don't need that so much anymore. We're not going to let them decide like who the next president is, for instance, because Hillary wants to be that. So all you guys can fuck off. I'm going to go make some documentaries. Like, it's wild. But that's like we talk about the cynicism of Gen Z. It's like, yeah, I'm not fucking surprised. We had a giant like lie to believe in. But what did they get?
But when we had Dustin Guastella on too, we were talking about the cynicism from the other side. Is that like, we all got to go through like the Bernie moment, right? A lot of people on the left, and like seriously, we're not old folks yet, but we are having these moments. Like we did a video on Bernie Sanders in 2016 a couple of weeks ago, Emma, and it was a stinker. Nobody watched it, and I was like, oh, maybe it was a bad video. But then I had a realization that also for a lot of folks who are getting into politics who watch these programs, that's old history. Like that's prehistory for their movement. And those moments of participating in politics in that way, participating in those early days of DSA, that kind of organizing was something that was very hopeful and sustaining, and that's exploded. So, like, we can talk about Obama and Organizing for America, whatever, but also the Bernie movement. It's been horrendous to see how quickly that has sort of collapsed.
Right.
And now there are little islands out there, and I don't think it's possible to recalibrate that. But we had this moment where we were moving from protest to politics, right? So much of the left's politics was like, oh, we can protest this, we'll protest that. Don't get me wrong, this stuff's important. We're doing protests again now. But there's a kind of fear about doing politics again. And you see this even in the way that the squad participates in politics. That's a whole other can of worms, like the relationship with the base and all that kind of thing. But a lot of that kind of like the class language, the economic message that was so popular about Bernie Sanders, that resonated with so many folks with Bernie Sanders, a lot of that has taken second space with a lot of these folks. And that's a real damage to this movement in the long run.
Well, I mean, speaking about Obama, that was the moment I was 14, 13. That's when I got really into politics for the first time, when, it was the primary, and I couldn't understand why anybody saw anything in this woman named Hillary Clinton. By the way, by her own logic, Biden would fail her 3 a.m. phone call test. Who do you want on the phone call at 3 in the morning if she tried to use against Obama? Like, Biden's failing that one, not Obama. But anyway, like, it was because that was the Iraq War, and in particular, like, had really captured my attention and my anger, and that was the moment I got interested in politics. And then you can almost see that with Generation Z as it relates to Gaza right now, where we're at a moment like where we're a few years out from maybe that being used electorally right now, but it'll eventually happen, and you'll have politicians that say, I was on the right side of this and you weren't, in the way that Obama said it. He was not in the Senate. Who knows how he would have voted if he were in that position at the time, but Hillary Clinton obviously supported the Iraq War. And so that will be the next frontier. And then it's going to be like, okay, but when this comes around again, will there be systemic changes, or will this just be used cynically for electoral purposes? Will there be a reckoning with the policies that led us to the Iraq War, where we killed hundreds of thousands of people and legally invaded a country that didn't attack us? Will there be systemic reckonings with the Zionism and how easily a democratic administration greenlit a genocide and a crimes against humanity that will go down in history as, some of the worst things that we'll ever have experienced in our lifetime, if not the worst? And we don't even know the full reality of how many people are dead and all of that. So the point is just that there has to be some sort of seismic shift in that in the relationship to that energy, because like it's building up this kind of it's ossifying and hardening people to a point where I can't see a positive end without there being some give in the power structure.
Some kind of rupture. I mean, maybe we can sort of leave on this, but I think one thing, and I'm just want to hear your thoughts on this at least. But like one thing that scares the hell out of me is like what we're seeing right now when it comes to like Gaza, when it comes to abortion, all these things, like the way that the Democratic Party interacts with that. But hell, like I live in Texas, right? And we have all the most psycho stuff you can imagine. I mean, abortion is effectively illegal. They're trying to prevent us from even being able to do local democracy, right? Trying to take away our ability to pass basic protections for workers in a place 100 degrees outside, trying to make sure that we're trying to block people from mandating water breaks for construction workers in this state. And you look at it, it's like, look, yeah, I can have a lot of disagreement with, Republicans in this state and all that. But what's really frightening to me is when you look at the public polling in Texas and you see what they think about abortion. No, they don't like and support the full ban, right? They might want it at a certain week or whatever. Similar things with guns. What's really scary, and like why is no one who votes Republican who's not like a freak or an absolute psychopath wants the state government to block maybe a construction company owner, Elon Musk, from blocking these kind of things. So what really scares the hell out of me is just seeing this disconnect in this country between like the elected governments and the people. And I'm not trying to do like, there's no difference between blue and red or anything like that. But it is really, truly fascinating and worrying when you realize that like the influence that it seems that the American people have on politics is limited. And I think a lot of people feel that and they're very frustrated by it and they're very worried about it. And it's something that scares the hell out of me. On the sunny side, it's something that gives me endless hope and inspiration when you realize even something like what we're seeing right now, it's not what our neighbors want. It's not what folks out there want. But anyway,
No, I mean, I think when was the last meaningful social spending legislation? LBJ?
You mean if you don't count the IRA? Yeah.
I don't count the IRA.
Yeah.
Like the creation of a substantial universal government program, Medicare.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So
it's been beaten to death.
And they're trying to, like, just think about that for a second. I mean, what was that, 1964?
Yeah, somewhere around
passage?
Was it 65? I don't know specifically when.
It's 64, 65. That is the reality of like what our representative democracy has wrought. And I think that you're right that there is a reckoning coming. And I think in that time period, and of course, like markets were unleashed in the 70s and 80s, the taxes were slashed, the power of capital, the campaign finance laws that began to be undone in the 70s in Buckley v. Vallejo, which paved the way, of course, for Citizens United later on. And the capture of those institutions in the wake of that, it's not a coincidence that those things align. And then the only thing that we can really get done is defense spending and funding a genocide or funding the Iraq war and the wars that follow, the not so cold war for Cambodia, for Vietnam, for all these other countries that we waged war in Afghanistan. We can get that done. We can get Israel money done. But when it comes to like kind of just basic robust legislation, and we saw, I wouldn't count the Affordable Care Act in that way because it was a market first subsidy basically proposal. So that was the closest attempt that we got, and we had the child tax credit, but that was of course temporary.
They didn't even defend it. It's so crazy how they treated that.
Oh, we
should dwell on that because the conventional wisdom was when you do something like that to people, it's very hard to take away. And this government's like, fuck, it isn't. You're done eating, kids.
Yeah, right, exactly, and immediately cut child poverty by 40%. Immediately. And it just
And
shows
I mean, it reflects our media that no one gave a shit, because no one in the CNN is going to actually knows anybody that benefited from
No,
that.
because they're all politically perverted. Like, they think that doing politics is a bad thing. I mean, we've had for the past few years, AMLO in Mexico, he's been doing his morning press conferences, and that gets written up in the New York Times, literally as wow, he's a demagogue talking to the public about what he thinks about politics.
Yeah.
And you just see something like that, and it's oh, you mean he's doing a dastardly move, trying to convince people to support his programs? It's wild when you see the way that this media class is so allergic to mass politics. But it's because I think, a lot of American liberalism, I mean, American conservatism is just a disgust at a lot of people, right? But American liberalism, for the most part, is the disgust of mass politics and the disgust at the mob, right? The quote mob.
Right.
And you see it in the media.
But that's the rot that I'm talking about. Free market liberalism and liberalism, if you're gay, that's fine. And this is the most insufficient and also harmful thing that, that's a part of my political evolution there as well, where you see the decay and how that enables fascism. And it enables far-right politics, because the institutions are now protecting a system that has not delivered in any real substantive social spending way for people for, maybe our lifetimes, the three of us added up together. And that's in the form of the filibuster, where you need 60 votes to get anything passed that isn't directly related to the budget in the Senate. That's in the form of the way that gerrymandering happens. And when people talk about these particular issues, it's not about the larger one, which is that this failure of liberalism has enabled far-right politics. And even if Zionism is considered something that can be shared by the right-wing party and the Democratic Party in this country, that doesn't mean that Zionism isn't a far-right ideology when you look at the scale of the world. And I feel that way in many ways about the context of our imperial decline and this country and where we're at right now. Because in the context of America, we can talk about left or right. It's the same thing in Israel. Oh, the liberals in the Knesset versus, the larger, broader global context just makes it so clear the dire situation that our institutions are in, and it's been brought on themselves.
I mean, there's a truism in fascism where it's it comes from the colonies. Spain, for instance, Franco came from the colonies, and in this case, it will too. In a way, be a handmaiden with our support for Zionism for all this years. But Emma, I do want to let you leave the Majority Report studio at some point today. I appreciate you hanging around. I do just want to say one final point, which is, the funniest thing to happen would be if Biden stays on the ticket and actually wins, because the insanity that would provoke in the right wing would be something else. But I don't mean to contradict the entire message of today's show, but Trump has lost a key endorsement. And I think Biden might actually have a narrow path to victory now that includes winning Tennessee. This is from the Biden's wins Twitter page, which is how I start my day and how I end my day in these tough times. I just scroll off all the Biden wins, but they have an important note here. Breaking, the Haktua girl just absolutely demolished Donald Trump, saying it's a no-go for her. Retweet makes sure all Americans know Gen Z speaking out against Donald Trump and his radical agenda. We have to play this. Let's see.
No, it's not that scary, I promise. It's called Haktua or Nah. And you tell me if you want to Haktua on that thing or no. Okay. I think you might. Are you into older guys?
For sure.
Okay.
Oh yeah.
Fuck,
Hell
my
yeah.
phone's not
looking good, Joe. Well,
right,
actually,
ready?
Joe's old too. We don't know who that is.
Come on. Oh, just a huck?
Bad podcasting.
I'll give him a hawk. I'll give him a hawk.
Not a Tua.
Okay, beautiful. There you go, Dave. You got a huck.
I think it's Portney, which is pretty
No,
rough.
absolutely not.
No.
Oh, was it Portnoy? Oh, wait, here it is. This is the Trump moment.
Okay, beautiful. There you go, Dave. You got a huck. Donald Trump.
Oh, wait, that's what you were saying. So they didn't know who Dave Portnoy is, which is honestly my favorite part of this clip.
Rich. Yes. Oh, thank God.
That's
God.
actually restored. Anyway, okay, so and let's just play.
Trump.
No, absolutely not.
No.
So,
Big
Joe,
big win for Joe.
I could just imagine Hunter Biden like running into the room, be like, "Dad, the Hawk Tuah girl won't spit on Trump's thing. There's actually reason to stay in this thing."
I mean, you got to you got to feel for the Biden wins Twitter account this week. They're having to sift through a lot of shit to find some gold, and I don't.
They are scraping the bottom of the barrel there. So she gives Dave a hawk, but not a Tua. The hawk.
I guess it's like a part, yeah.
So
the
a
Tua is the part.
So she'll
yeah,
cough
exactly.
on
The
that
Tua is the
thing.
part you want. I don't know.
Right, that's my understanding. But yeah. So just a dry heave. That's not what. Good. That's what he deserves. That's what he deserves.
Yeah.
That he doesn't deserve a Tua.
That's funny.
Anyway.
That's funny. I thought that was relevant to Trump, but that is really just relevant to the kids don't know who Dave Portnoy is. And I fucking love that. Yeah. Well, Emma Vigeland, she did the Emma Sports Vigeland show today. So you can see her on Majority Report noon to 2:30. Emma, thank you so much for grace. And I mean, frankly, driving up the viewership for this week's show, because we're doing really well. Thanks for everybody who doesn't tune in every week. It's like you know what I feel like? I feel like I'm a preacher and it's Easter and like the congregation is just full. And I'm like, oh, okay, I see that. But anyway, thanks a bunch, Emma. For,
okay, well,
this.
so am I Jesus Christ in this instance?
Yeah, you're the returning Christ.
All right, like
you and Russell Brand are gonna have to fight for it because he's really developing his Messiah complex.
Let's not inflate my ego anymore because I'm about to do high step it into here and just say, hey Sam, what's up. I called this thing about Biden, but I'm holding my fire until something actually.
I mean, you'll notice I did call you the host of Majority Report at the top of the show this evening. So,
all right, well,
it's a coup.
We're laying our plans.
It's coup season.
Exactly.
All right,
guys.
See you, Emma.
Thank you very much, Emma.
Thanks so much. Bye.
Bye.
Well, friends, we're talking about coup. Matt, I talked about it a little bit during the Griscom stream last week, but did you see about this Bolivia coup? A lot of very weird stuff going on there. That if
I saw this. I saw you were the first person I saw to flag the allegation that the coup against Arce was in fact a self-coup staged on behalf of Arce. And when you I thought I almost retweeted it because I'm like, this is wild. And I'm like, maybe we'll wait to see how this develops. And I'm still not clear how serious it is. This is a wild thing that's going on.
It's absolutely a wild thing. And we're going to be talking about that in the post game, patreon.com/leftreckoning to get access to it, along with taking questions from our wonderful patrons and talking about a couple other stories. So you won't want to miss it. Patreon.com/leftreckoning to get access to it. Really great having Emma on to talk to us about our sundowning empire. Times are tough. We try to be a little optimistic, but very happy to have this community and good friends here. So come and join us on the other side, patreon.com/leftreckoning.
Yep, folks. We'll see you. Yeah, patreon.com/leftreckoning. Come hang out with us. See you in a little bit.